This is the Chicago Booth Big Data and Analytics Roundtable. This roundtable has been going since about 2014. I am Roger Moore. I am founder of the group, and I am the current board chair for the group as well. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering what's going on. My phone decided to call. So, so we've been going since 2014. This roundtable is all about this group. This is intended to be a way for everybody to learn more about data and analytics. We definitely have more of a business bent, so there won't be code flying up on the screen or talking about whether we should use Python or R in this case. It is more of how do we use it, the so what around data and analytics. And I think we have a really good speaker this week to get into data and data and analytics in your company. What's going on with those teams and those people and how it's being used. So looking forward to that. I want to let people know that we are counting on you. So if you're interested in getting involved, number one, let people know that this group exists. You can join the meetup and you'll get on the email list. There's a Chicago Booth mailing list if you go to the Chicago Booth site, and you can get on that mailing list. And if you can, join a committee. We're looking for some help around logistics and some of the research and things like that, where we try to look at our group and what's there and what kinds of events would be interesting for this group to go after. So please consider that as you're looking at what's going on, okay? And I think that's it for that. Oh, I wanted to let people know that we do have, and I'll stop and I'll go to this right away. We do have an event next month. There it went. AI for social good from Microsoft. They're spending actually a fairly large amount of money on doing things in AI for social good space. And we've got a speaker that's going to talk about that. We also have Wavical lined up for November to talk about text analytics. We're still looking for a speaker for October. We're working on that, and as well as December, but we hope to fill those in, okay? Now I want to turn it over to you. I like to do a little testing of what's going on out there. This helps me kind of understand what the market is looking like. Although we've got Linda who can tell us a lot about what the market is doing, this is a little bit as a sub-test. So if any of you have a rec for your company, have a need for somebody in this data and analytics space, let us know. Does anybody have a need for somebody in data and analytics right now? Everybody's being very quiet.
Right.
There's got to be somebody out there that's looking for some help. Ken, come on, you've got to have some needs, don't you?
We just hired someone in Chicago, so.
Okay.
And so we're pleased.
Okay, but you did just hire somebody. That's a sign too.
Yes.
That's always a good thing. And then I just saw Jackie. I'm calling on people that I know. Jackie, how are you guys doing? Are you looking for some data scientists or people related to data science?
Yes, always.
Okay. Do you have any specific needs or numbers, idea of what you're looking for?
I can get that over to you. Yeah, I can absolutely get that over to you. Are you looking for a data scientist? Sorry, I came in a little bit late.
Yeah, I know. We're just looking for, if you have recs, letting the group know what it looks like out there if there's a need for data scientists. It's my way of kind of feeling the market out, although I think Linda's going to help us with that a lot more. But Ken said they just hired somebody, and I was just wondering if you guys were looking for people in the data and analytics space.
Yes, we are. I can think of one particular client that we're working with right now where there's going to be upcoming needs.
Okay.
And a lot of our clients are in need of it, but we're I'm working on one particular engagement where I know that we're going to need data scientists.
Okay, okay. Very good, very good. Anybody else have anything? All right, and then the second thing I like to do with the group is to ask if anybody knows of other events going on. In this case, it's all webinars as it goes. But is there anything else out there that you've seen that you think this group might be interested in knowing about? Usually I have a couple and I don't right now. It's kind of interesting. There aren't any Chicago groups doing things that I know about, which is kind of interesting.
I haven't heard of anything except for I think we just, and you guys don't need to attend because it'll be pretty redundant, but we're going to be giving a talk to women in data, right, Stacy? What's that date? It's next month sometime.
Yeah, that's going to be at the end of September. So there's a Women in Data meetup group that two of our recruiters are going to be speaking to.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that anybody has? Okay. That means we can get to the good part of this webinar. And I'll start this out by saying, and everybody is doing this really well, please try to stay muted as best you can, or at least don't be making noise if you are unmuted. We're also would appreciate if you want to turn on your video, that'd be great. You don't need to, but it makes it a little bit more personable if we can see who you are and what you're doing. So that would be okay. I know you can't always have your video on, but if that's okay with you, that'd be great. We're going to do this as a discussion. Everybody here is pretty, like I said, pretty good with the mutes already. But if you want to talk, unmute yourself and ask a question. Both Linda and I are very open to that kind of interaction. So we'll do it that way. If you're not quite that comfortable, and I just noticed we have somebody coming in. I wasn't looking at the chat right away, but I have something on the chat. You can use the chat to send messages as well. And I've got myself and then Stacy is taking a look at those and will help us out in making sure that we capture anything coming in on the chat side of things. So if you're not comfortable just unmuting and speaking out yourself. Okay, and then what I have here is a note that Blue Cross is looking for a data engineer in their data analytics group. And a question, how about data science applications to cybersecurity? And I don't have anything specific on that right now. But if anybody has any thoughts or any notes on that, that'd be great. But we'll keep looking at the questions and we'll keep coming back to them as they come up. Okay. All right. Any questions from the group? Any comments from the group before we get rolling? Then let me introduce our speaker today. I'll let her talk through her background and things. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. Our speaker is Linda Burtch from Burtch Works. She's got a lot to talk about, some very interesting things about data science and the teams and the people. Okay, Linda, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Roger. That was nice. The title for my talk today is anyone operating business as usual? And I don't think that anybody is really. As Roger mentioned, I'm an executive recruiter. I have a team of 15 people working out of an office in Evanston, but we do recruit across the country. And we're talking to dozens of people every day. And during those conversations, we're able to collect a lot of information about what's going on out there. And so I wanted to take the time today to focus on a couple of things. First, we're going to talk a little bit about compensation. And then I also want to talk about the impact of COVID on the analytics community. So next slide, please, Roger. So Roger said a little bit about me, but I've been in recruiting for a long time, like decades. So I don't even talk about that number anymore because it's a negative, not a positive. I personally focus on working with folks that are at the senior end, but the work that we do is at all levels. So we develop a relationship with quantitative people that are coming out of programs in mathematics or statistics or operations research, economics, and so on, either at the bachelor's, master's, or PhD level. And I truly mean that we develop that relationship and we stay in touch with people. Once you get our first contact with us, we don't let you get away ever. So, so anyway, but it's been really the pleasure of my career to be able to say that I have people that I've known for so long who are now at the CAO level. So I'm quite proud of that. So. Anyway, so we recruit across the country. We work with large companies and small companies, Procter & Gamble and Aetna and Johnson & Johnson and Unilever and, lots and lots of very large organizations. We also work with companies like Electronic Arts and Activision, and actually a couple of smaller startup online gaming organizations too. One that actually provides gaming technology for doctors to play so they can learn. So, which I think is really fascinating stuff. But also, a lot of startups in the fintech area as well as in health tech. So kind of all over the map. So, let's see, what else can I say? Oh yeah, Carolina Panthers, I wanted to mention that. They're one of our clients too. So, but anyway, why don't we continue on with the talk? Next slide, Roger. So I have a lot of topics to cover today. First, I want to get into the demographics of the profile of the people that we work with and tell you a little bit, give you some numbers around that. And then I also want to talk about the 2020 analytics salary study that we just completed. We gave that presentation just a couple of weeks ago, so it's hot off the presses. Then I want to follow that up by doing more of a deep dive into the COVID-19 impacts to the analytics community, and that is through some of the survey work that we've done recently. And then finally, I want to speculate a little bit on the future. So now, as Roger mentioned, I really would like to keep this interactive, so don't be shy. Break in at any point. I'd rather it be a discussion as opposed to me doing all the talking. And there's going to be time at the end too for any questions or discussion. So at some point, I may ask you some questions, so be ready for that. So. The other thing I wanted to mention is be sure to stay in touch with us and watch our website, because we're going to be doing a lot more research in the upcoming months because things are changing so fast out there in the employment market. So, so next I'll talk about the Burtch Works Study. So next slide, Roger, please. This is our 8th year that we put together these compensation studies, and it is used by many firms to set salaries. So the compensation, I've actually had many of my senior level people tell me that they use it for to get their teams an increase or to set their compensation. And then they also tell me, and I use it for my own purposes too. So there's just lots and lots of information. It's this year's report is over actually 50 pages long because there's a whole section in there about COVID, but it slices and dices the data by by not only level, but also what industry you're in, where you live, what your educational background is, visa status, lots and lots of different ways. So it's quite robust. And we compare it to the prior year. So we're watching for trends and what's happening with the data. So what's a little bit different about the way we do our compensation studies is we do it through personal interviews of candidates, and we talk to them during the course of the work that we're doing. And then also we ask for people to provide compensation information. But again, we do that through personal conversations. And I'll tell you, people have been very open with me on providing information pretty much freely. And we all know there's been, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about privacy matters and laws actually prohibiting the talk of specific compensation information. And I take a little bit of a contrarian view on this because I really believe that transparency is actually the way to prevent any funny business from going on. Because if everybody knew what everybody else was making, everything would be much more fair. So that's been my philosophy all along. And luckily, a lot of my quantitative contacts agree with me on that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. So I'm one of those people that has used the study and talked. I had a data science team and I had a member that wanted to raise, felt that they weren't being compensated fairly. And we went through the Burtch Works Study, which they were aware of. But we went through all the slices and dices. You're living, in the valley. Your, master's degree, not a PhD. You've got 3 years of experience. Here's what we're paying you. That puts you at the 75th percentile of the salaries. And I said, I think that's pretty fair for what's going on right now. And they agreed. It actually made it, a non-issue. It was very nice to have a conversation, as you said, very open, very transparent about this. So those studies, and I'm amazed at the number of people that are aware of your studies, Linda.
Yeah,
so
right. And it's interesting because the first year that I put the study out, I was so nervous because really it is chock full of information. It's pretty dense. But anyway, I'm talking to a quantitative audience. I better get it right, because if I didn't get it right, I would hear about it. So luckily, I've not gotten a single complaint. That, I mean, people complain to me all the time, but not about that. So, right. Okay, next. Keep going. So now what I want to do is jump into data, since everybody here is pretty quantitative. And then next slide, let's start with some demographic information on the analytics community. So here you can see on this slide that the discipline skews very young, and that's no surprise to any of you, I'm sure. There's been just a ton of interest in the field, and there's just lots and lots of young people that are jumping in. So in 2008, just to give you a data point here, there was one advanced analytics program that was focused on business analytics, one master's program. Now there are over 300 programs. So that just tells you the explosion in such a short period of time. Many of those in the last 5 years. So, which is interesting because we're talking to a lot of booth people here, right? And I was wondering if anybody wants to chime in on how they feel about the master's programs in analytics versus an MBA. Thoughts? I said I was going to ask you some questions.
While people prepare, I'll jump in.
Okay.
That is one thing that is interesting to me. So I have the booth background. And I teach at the Master of Science and Analytics program at University of Chicago. So I see both sides. Yeah. And I've had, let's say, more than one hand of people come up and want to discuss, does it make more sense for me to get an MBA or to get an analytics degree? And I don't answer it directly. I help them think about that, but it isn't as clear. Back 5-10 years ago, it was like MBA was the thing to get. Analytics clearly is a strong degree at this point in time. It's something that's it's practical and usable out there, and that's what MBAs were at the time. So I think the MBA degree is getting a big challenge from the analytics degree.
Right.
So
what about the idea of blending the two, or really beefing up the analytics within the MBA program? Or is that just not, has that not even been a discussion topic?
And this is where I don't know who's got a newer Booth degree, and everybody does compared to me, I think. When I was in the Booth program, there were no analytics, no data science and analytics kinds of classes, but I've heard that they've got quite a few now. Is that the case, and are people taking those? Has anybody been to Booth and taken an analytics class? Wow.
Well, my degree is I was able to celebrate 20 years of getting my MBA, and we didn't do a lot of the predictive analytics, obviously, because that wasn't how the classes were structured then. But there were a lot of work that I did when I was working for a mutual fund company, so I could do a lot of analytics that were directly related to what a financial firm would need. Now, I would love to have classes on that, but there's a lot of little classes here and there that I could take. And, part of it is finding the time to do it. And of course, I wouldn't be perceived as valuable as someone who's just out of school and fresh from a full semester or full year of those classes. So, end of comment.
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see how the whole MBA, the movement away from the MBA programs, traditional MBA programs, as people decide to get more specialized. It's, quantitative degree is tough. The courses are rigorous. They build on, one builds on the next. So it's, it tends to be a very rigorous, tough program. And sort of you learn the business on the side. So you learn the analytics and you learn the business on the side. So but we'll see, time will tell, but there's been a pretty quick shift away from MBAs at this point.
And Linda, I'm going to call back to a conversation we had years ago. Yeah. And I tell my classes, I've got one student here and he can confirm that I tell this story. And that is, you told me that one thing that was really interesting about the analytics degrees is that, unlike technology, where the most you could ever hope for to get to is a CIO or maybe a CTO kind of role, as an analytics professional, that all of the CEOs previously were coming from the sales side of things. They knew the customers, they knew the products, they knew all of that. Analytics people are developing those same skill sets. They know the products because they're doing all the feature analytics around them. They know the customers because they're doing the segmentation in that. So the analytics people that are getting those degrees have as much chance of becoming a CEO as an MBA does. So that opens up the door.
Absolutely true. And when I'm working with clients that are, let's say, hiring their first quantitative person and they're hiring them at a pretty senior level, they never know where to put them in an organization. Does it report up to the CIO? Does it report up to the CFO? Does it belong under marketing? Where does it go? And the answer is it doesn't belong under any. It belongs at its own, C-level. And, I've always said that my quantitative candidates were so smart that they should be running companies, and now they will be. So I'm really excited about that.
Very good.
So, okay, let's keep going. So let's talk about gender breakdown a little bit. Now, men continue to outnumber women in analytics. So of our database, 28% were women, and that's at all levels. That number actually matches up with most of the STEM field, so it's not unusual. I'll also add, though, that more women are getting into the field than ever. In 2017, this number was 24%, so there's been some progress there for women. The other thing that I want to add is that I know, just anecdotally, there are more women than ever getting into the analytics analytics world, but the number of men has also increased. And so it's not moving the percentages very much, but it's good to see as many women in the field now. So next slide shows how the proportion of women shift as experience and management level increases. So IC 1, 2, and 3 stands for individual contributors at various levels. And then the MG 1, 2, and 3, MG3 of course is at the top, and that's going to be at the VP or SVP level. So, so you can kind of see it decreases, the number of women decrease as a percentage as they climb the ladder. Next slide. Now, here I'm going to talk a little bit, at least from a very high level, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but on salaries for predictive analytics professionals. Now, this is at the IC level or individual contributor level. So IC 1 are for people in their early years. So let's say up to about 3, maybe 4 years experience. Their median salary is $80,000, and that did not change at all from last year. IC 2 are for folks that are up to about 8, 9 years experience, and their median is 100,000, and that increased a little bit from last year. And IC3 are for those individual contributors that are sort of long-term individual contributors who may have made the decision not to get into a management kind of role. That median salary is 135 and is again a little bit higher than last year. So let's talk about managers next. So here it's broken down MG1, MG2, and MG3. And this, it's not as much about years experience as it is about span of control and how many people on the team. So MG1 is more of a tactical manager and would have about 5 people reporting to them, up to 5 people reporting to them. Their average or their median salary was $132,000. And that went up about 2% from last year. MG2 is at mid-level manager. So that's senior manager, director, getting into senior director. And so they've got maybe about up to 15, maybe 20 people reporting to them. Median base is 180. And this is where at this level is when the equity component, the bonus and equity component get to be more interesting. So base salary is sometimes not as critical. MG3 stayed about the same last year, and these are, the median salary is $250. Again, those are VP level and SVP level. Oftentimes these people will have, 40 to 70 people on their teams. So next slide. So now let's talk about how COVID is impacting the analytics job market. Everybody knows COVID has had a huge impact. It's certainly the largest event in my career lifetime. So we have over 70,000 contacts at Burtch Works that we stay in touch with. So in March, when the whole coronavirus hit and the lockdowns were put into place, I decided that I wanted to understand over time how it impacted the analytics community. So we teamed up with IIA, which some of you might be familiar with, the International Institute for Analytics. It's a research and advisory firm that was founded 11 years ago by Jack Phillips and Tom Davenport. So we did a flash survey, 5 waves, starting at the end of March through the end of May. And then we did a follow-up survey just last month where we got responses from about 350 people. So much of the insight that I'm going to talk about next comes out of those survey responses. But what I first want to do is talk about some wider numbers. This next slide
There we go.
It shows the U.S. unemployment rate. So the the rate in April was 14.7%, and that contrasts with the historical high, which was up to that point was 10.8%, and that was back in 1982. Also, back in April, the White House was actually estimating that the unemployment rate was going to go up to 20%. So that did not happen, luckily. The latest numbers for July are 10.2%. So, and then next week, we're going to see the numbers for August. So we'll see what happens. I suspect it's not going to change all that much from where it is now. But we'll see. So next slide. Here, during the early days of the shutdown, I was tracking on a week-to-week basis who was laying off. And this is just a very sort of condensed version, but you can see some interesting patterns in this data. So obviously in the very beginning, the international airlines shut down right away and started doing layoffs, as well as a number of the hospitality organizations. And then it was followed by restaurants as well as retail organizations in the next couple of weeks. So you can see all those names. After that, 3-4 weeks in, things started to settle down just a little bit. But then I found what I found interesting was in about the 5th or 6th week, the startups started to lay off. So I'm talking about WeWork and Uber and Lyft, et cetera, all those startups. But I was kind of surprised that they wouldn't have started laying off sooner than that, because it was pretty clear it was going to impact their businesses in a big way. And I would have thought that they'd be very interested in conserving cash. So in May, the analytics outsourcing firms started to lay off. So I'm talking about like Genpact and Cognizant and those kinds of organizations, as corporations were really pulling back on their spending too. Next slide.
I was just going to ask, Linda, do any of these names surprise you? Did anybody surprise you that popped up on this list, or was it all sort of, yeah, I get that? I'm just doing a quick run through, and like you said, it's like it's travel, it's big retail, right. So nothing is jumping out at me that way.
Right. Well, now some things are surprising me, but back then it was, it was everybody that you would expect. So it was following a pattern that was pretty predictable, except for the startups I thought waited much longer than I would have anticipated. So, yeah. So now, so who's not layoffs? Let's talk about that next, and that's on this next slide. Now, this is a slide actually that I used back in May, but I wanted to throw it in here just to kind of illustrate the fact that some of these have started to, or in the last month or so, have started to lay off people. The airlines, of course, are announcing layoffs now. The airlines here in the United States, American just announced this week that they were going to lay off 19,000 people on October 1st. So we'll start to see a number of those making those kinds of announcements. Advertising agencies, too, have really escalated their layoffs because ad dollars are drying up in a significant way. Also big consulting, and by that I mean Accenture and PwC and Deloitte, about I think 3 or 4 weeks ago started doing some pretty significant layoffs. Now early on in the crisis, the consulting organizations were kept pretty busy because they pivoted a lot of their work to for their clients to help them understand and get through the COVID crisis, right? So, and to understand what was going on, how it was impacting their business, et cetera, et cetera. So they were pretty busy. But now that we're 5-6 months in, the pipeline's starting to dry up. So it's getting, that's why we're seeing these layoffs. Now, there's been a couple of organizations, namely Bain and BCG, who have both announced that they are not going to do any significant layoffs. So Also, some of the banks have committed to not laying off people too. So, so we'll see. I mean, the bank thing is kind of interesting. Does anybody here work for a bank? Oh, the sun is coming in the window. Nobody works for a bank? Because the banks are kind of an interesting case because, you know, that some of the research is showing that they are, a lot of people used their stimulus money to pay down debt. And so the banks kind of got a reprieve a little bit there. But now that a lot of the stimulus money has gone, we'll see as this, you know, as we progress through this crisis, we'll see what happens.
I was laid off from a bank.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was working as a contractor for a bank, and I was laid off in March. But what's funny is for my job search right now, most of the activity that I'm seeing is with banks. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of our junior analytics people were telling us in the early days that they had to drop everything that they were doing and work on processing PPP loans. So they were busy doing that for about 3 weeks, which I thought was kind of interesting, right? And then some of my quantitative people that were working at startups, same thing. They had to stop everything, and all they did was process information to apply for the PPP loan. So there's pretty significant shifts going on there. Yeah, you know, there are organizations that are hiring too. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are hiring, no surprise there, as is the consumer packaged goods companies are hiring right now. Insurance companies are also, we're working with healthcare organizations. So, you know, you're either on the right side or the wrong side of this crisis. So, you know, another group that you know, I just got off the phone today with a private equity group, and they're looking for analytics people to assist with their portfolio companies or to do investment analysis, of course. So, so a lot of them are also looking, and you know, finance people, it's all about timing for them. So they figure they could probably take advantage of this market and snap up some pretty good people because of the market conditions. And they are right. You know, it's a good time to be looking for people right now. So any other layoff news that people want to share, or stories, or?
Linda, I'm just curious. Manufacturing is a very large industry or sector, and I don't see that on there, which lines up with some, you know, personal people, you know, some personal relationships who have, you know, weathered the storm quite well.
Right.
But I was just wondering if that hit your radar at all.
Right, and certainly the energy industry has been devastated. So, you know, there's a lot of people I talk to in Texas and Oklahoma that are working on, a lot of them were data scientists working in IoT. So, and they've been, you know, pretty greatly affected. And then some manufacturing, that's a little spottier though. It kind of depends. I mean, last year, GE just wiped out a whole bunch of people, but that really didn't have anything to do with what's going on with the COVID thing. We'll see, you know, the automotive companies to some degree, I mean, they have spent a lot of money with the connected car initiatives that they had, but I'm kind of wondering if they might pull back on that. You know, one thing that kind of makes me, well, I was going to say mad, but let me say just discouraged, is the idea that there's some companies that I think are industries that I think are using COVID as more of a cover to go through layoffs. So
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you saw the announcement from Salesforce today, but Salesforce had, you know, their stock price is like up 26% or something. They had this gangbuster report that came out today on their profitability, And they also announced that they were going to lay off 1,000 people, right? Like, now is not the time to be laying off people if you don't have to, right? It's, I don't know, that kind of, and you know, the other company that's doing that is Walmart too. They're laying off people. Allstate is laying off people. These, you know, these companies are doing fine. So I just, the timing on a layoff like this is kind of like icky. I don't know. Do you have any, Roger, I want you to comment on that.
Having worked for one of the major management consulting firms, yeah, you don't let a good crisis go to waste. You always are looking at, you know, making sure that you're making the right moves. And I can tell you on the consulting side why the BCGs and the Bains and the McKinseys are doing well. It's because all the companies out there are looking at, what do we do today so that we don't crash? What do we need to do to come back? And how do we come back? And then the other one that they're dealing with is, how do we deal with COVID? How do we think about that mixing in with everything else that's going on? So they've got a lot of work to do, but you're right, the big consulting firms that are doing implementation, people are putting all that on hold. We don't need a new SAP and implementation. We can wait on that. Let's hold on to the cash, but we do need a strategy. I've talked with friends at BCG about those things. I haven't talked about the layoff kind of stuff. Yeah. I was involved in looking at that, but usually those do happen when you are hurting. You have to do that. And usually most big companies do it after they should have. So it does feel like that's true. Yeah, right. They seem to be leading with it, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
So the more, Linda, the more we've discussed this, the more curious I grow as to whether you were looking at primarily the analytics or maybe broader IT layoffs versus just general.
I was talking about general and not just analytics teams. I mean, in that chart, the prior chart, those were all analytics teams that were impacted. So, but generally speaking, like, you know, I don't know that anybody that's quantitative at Salesforce is going to be impacted by their upcoming layoff. I do know at Walmart, some quantitative people did get impacted.
Yeah.
So,
well, there is this other trend that's been going on for 10 years, which is automation, robotics, et cetera. And I know in the case of Walmart, that's something that they're looking at very seriously. Now, that's good for the technology-oriented people, and particularly data scientists, I would guess, but not necessarily. I mean, there's going to be a lot of hourly paid
right.
put out of work. So
right. So, well,
one point I wanted to raise is that Salesforce has been on a acquisition spree. And so when you're acquiring MuleSoft and Tableau and a number of the other organizations, if you think about your horizontals in the value chain, you're going to get duplicity with respect to your HR functions, your finance functions, your legal functions. And so those need to be adjusted, right, in order to accommodate for efficiencies and that sort of thing. Right. But, you know, in defending Salesforce, they are, they're allowing their surplus individuals to find positions over the next 2 months. And then after that, they would get a 6-month severance if they cannot. So just wanted to make sure that this is a little bit more balanced.
Okay, thank you for that. Right. Okay, why don't we continue on? So let's talk specifically about the analytics community, and is anybody operating business as usual? So next slide. Work from home is pretty much the new normal. Some of you may have participated in some of the flash surveys that Burtch Works has sent out, but in a flash survey, I send it out to a large audience, and I usually only ask one question, sometimes 2 questions, and I get a big and a very quick response, and because it's easy to do. So in this case, I got 346 responses, and I didn't have to slice it and dice it by any of the information that I know about these people, because only 1.5 people said that they were not working from home. One was in supporting a quality function in a manufacturing facility, and the other one was supporting a lab and had to go in 2 or 3 times a week for that. So pretty small percent.
Yeah, how about people on the call? Are you guys all working from anybody? Let's do it this way. Anybody having to go into the office?
The companies that I've been talking to right now in my job search are telling me, hey, we're all working from home right now for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I get into some of those numbers in a later slide too.
Okay.
So next slide shows a number of the comments that I've gotten back from people. There has not been a huge rush of people getting back to the office at all. And then we did a survey that specifically looked at this. So the next slide gets into some of those numbers. So the results were really interesting. You can see here that it seems like roughly 25% will be back in the office before the end of this year. But it seems like there was a pretty high percent, about 28%, who didn't really know when they were going to be back. Nothing had been announced yet. Another 4% said that they'll be permanently working from home. And I wonder whether or not that number is going to increase as time goes on. So, there's a lot in the press that's been written about this very topic. And so nobody in this call is working in an office right now? Am I reading that right? Yeah, that's very typical. Does anybody have a date before the end of the year where they're planning to go back? No, right, yeah, and that's about what I'm hearing about. So, okay, next slide.
Well, could I, bounce this one off of you? It seems like just the cost of having people go into the office and the risk of that is a big burden for the companies to undertake. So,
yeah, I would guess that that's the case. Yes, it's risky, from a health perspective, and I think most companies aren't willing to, put their people through that and take on that risk. So, right. So there's a lot of barriers, I think, to people getting back. I will say, though, that what's been interesting in the last 2 weeks, we've had most of our candidates are video interviewing, and they're going through the process pretty quickly. Well, now, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 3 candidates actually meet face-to-face with people. So it's just now starting, which I think is kind of interesting. Yeah. So it might be coming back. We'll see.
How were those face-to-face handled? Did they go into their office? Did they meet kind of open air restaurant?
In 2 cases, it was in the office, and 1 person gave a presentation. Yeah. And
wow.
In 1 case, it was just for a coffee.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very interesting how. And let's see, 1 was in the Midwest and 2 are on the East Coast. So, yeah. Okay, next slide. So, one of the things that I think is kind of interesting to discuss is with the new normal, what are the longer term impacts to working from home? Now, the obvious one is, of course, from a corporate perspective, they have the opportunity to look at a wider pool of available talent. But also, conversely, the candidate has a wider choice of employers. So that's probably good from both angles. Is there going to be a salary impact here? Are we going to see compensation that's a little bit lower next year? It's interesting. Our salary collection period was through the end of April. So lucky for us, we should have a pretty clean idea of if there's any changes to compensation in next year's numbers. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who have had to take pay cuts, and many people are being told that nobody is going to be getting compensation increases this year. Many people are already announcing that there'll be no bonuses this year. 401k match programs are, in many cases have been canceled. So there's been a lot of compensation action this year already. So, one of the things also that, Mark Zuckerberg said was he's saying everybody can work from home, they can work from anywhere now. But if you work away from the Silicon Valley office, that your salary will be adjusted. And I'm thinking he's probably meaning down. So it's kind of interesting. So
can I comment on that?
Yeah.
As well. I have a few friends over at Facebook and a few other places that I'm not just going to note, but I'm actually seeing a little bit of a different where they're getting benefits or I would say incentives to work from home in regards to stipends for home office improvements, actually increases because now that you're at home, you're using your Wi-Fi, your internet, you're using a lot of supplies that normally operationally your organization would foot that cost.
Right.
So I'm just wanting to throw that in to this point of the discussion. So
that's interesting. I've not heard of people getting compensated for those kinds of things, but that's absolutely valid. There's a cost. I mean, I suppose your commuting costs have gone down, but there's clearly a cost to people to work from home. So, yeah. Also,
I think that's, I'll just throw this in. It's like, it seems like there's costs and benefits to each of the groups. And we need to think about that, right? To see how that all balances out, right? I don't have to commute anymore. That's a lower cost, but it also is a time thing too. I now have time to myself that I didn't have before. Although I've heard a lot of stuff that says that everybody that's doing this is basically putting that all into work. And that's not good, but yeah, it is. It's like I'm using my home office. It'd be nice to have a nice chair in my home office. Do I get a stipend for that? A better internet. I think when I started this, I said, I've got my laptop, I got 2 screens, I've got a separate video camera. That costs money, right? That's something, yeah. So,
I told my people, just go to the office and get the equipment. Take home their monitors, take home their computers, take home the chairs. I don't care. It's not going to be used for a year. They might as well use it. So, yeah. Right.
Before the call, we were actually just talking about like the whole reason why I don't have video is because my computer doesn't have a webcam. So in order for me to use video on a call, I have to join via like either an iPad or a phone. But that means that I can't then moderate a chat if I'm going to be on a webinar. So there's definitely, you're finding like workarounds for all the things that you used to just be able to do in the office.
Yeah. Yeah. Like having to deal with Comcast.
Yeah. That's a real cost.
It's an issue. Yeah. So anyway, well, let's continue with this. Onboarding challenges too. I think, most people that are seasoned are, they're able to jump in and be productive and, they know what they're doing. But the early career people, I think it's a lot trickier for them to really onboard in a good way. I think the ramp up time is going to take longer for them. And then,
Linda, do you think onboarding for those junior people was good to begin with, and this, or I'll put it this way: I don't think it was good to begin with, and this is just making it worse.
Yeah, much worse. But I will tell you, I'm trying to think of the company. I was on this discussion, and I can't remember. There was like 8 companies on the call, and one organization said their human resources people took this as a challenge, and they rolled out something that was even better than what people got in the office, because they just decided, let's do this. They're starting from scratch, right? So they just said they want to do it right, which is really great. So I think, again, the longer this goes on, the more people have to adjust, their processes in order to accommodate this. But I'm not sure it's been smooth for early career people. So, yeah.
I get that redoing things. It's teaching
Yeah.
obviously changed, and I think it's really interesting. There are a lot of people that are really rethinking and redoing the way they teach, and it's one of those things. I don't think we were great at it before. This is really forcing us to take a close look at how do we do that.
Right.
I'm thinking it could be a big impact for all of us to be able to rethink and redo the way we approach our work, our training, our onboarding, all of that, if we take it to heart.
Right.
I saw a couple of professors that were just going to speak for 3 hours straight on their Zoom webinars. So they weren't going to do so well, I don't think.
Yeah, right. So, and then, the next one is, the whole idea of, how do you, from a distance, make sure communication really works smoothly, right? Or that people are collaborating. I mean, there's a lot of talk now about that collaboration at the, at the coffee maker, right? The sense of community or the sense of culture also is very hard to replicate when everybody's working from a distance. So, and those are issues that I think are going to be felt more as time goes on, as opposed to, if this is only a 3-month thing, who cares? But if this goes on for 1.5 years, 2 years, that it'll be interesting to see what happens that way. And then productivity last, that's another area that people have said, oh, I'm just amazed at how productive I can be at home. And I believe that because, I can head down and really, get a lot of work done. But the productivity impact is, when you think about it again, more broadly, when it comes to things like training and communication and all of those other things, the developing of those relationships, that building of trust. It's, between groups, between business units, with salespeople, with people on the plant floor. It's really hard to do if you're not there in person. So, so that I think is, again, longer term impact. The longer this goes on, the more productivity. I think that sort of bigger picture productivity is going to take a hit. So anybody want to comment on those? Because I'm sure you have different ideas about that or thoughts.
And while people are thinking, I'm going to jump in because I always have ideas already. I think it's going to change, some things for the better. Like, I know I will not be flying to California for a 2-hour meeting ever again. That was a productivity waste. That makes no sense. There was no real good reason to do that. But I can see where there are times when you need to get together in person and you need to figure out how to do that, but not for just a quick 2-hour meeting. It's like, okay, if there's something out there, let's figure out what that set of things are that we need to do to, collaborate, to feel comfortable, to get connected well, not just a fly out 2-hour meeting, fly back. That's not going to work anymore.
Right.
And I've done day trips to Sydney, Australia, and New Delhi, India.
Wow.
It's not fun. When you're traveling more in the plane than you are spending on the ground, that's just not right. So.
Yeah. And also, the productivity, this brings up the whole thought of, working from home. And if you have school-age children, how do you manage that? There is really no answer to that. That's easy. So, a lot of people are asking for reduced schedule, part-time. I have one person who's leaving me because he's going to be responsible for childcare in the fall. So then that's going to have a huge impact on people's careers and their earning potential. And, you know, it will fall more toward women than men generally. So that's unfortunate.
Linda, I've spent most of my career with IBM, and about 28 years ago, they decided to cut real estate expenses and sent everybody out to, you know, work out of their homes.
Right.
And
Remember that.
So a few years ago, we had a big reunion in the Chicago area. Hundreds of IBMers who'd been there for many, many years. And, you know, the discussion for the night was all about how we used to be in the branch, you know, when everything was going well, and then, well, dating myself in the, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and how everybody was able to collaborate. And, you know, over the last, you know, whatever, 20 years, you know, people, especially these gregarious IBMers, you know, we'd all been by ourselves working out of our homes long hours, and it just was never the same, you know, from that standpoint. It was, you know, I think that, at least for this group, I mean, the isolation was there, and we were all workaholics, and you just tend to get up, start working at 5:30 in the morning, and about 11:30 at night you go, oh yeah, I guess I should go to bed. But that was the long-term impact.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of research comes out of this.
Mm-hmm. It would be very interesting to, you know, to follow this.
Okay.
It is that, you know, that is the one thing that we're really missing in the collaboration, is the accidental meetings, the accidental conversations, the just one-offs, the you know, this dates me too, the water fountain conversations, right? Or the coffee maker, you know, conversations, where you get an idea or you bounce an idea off of somebody just routinely. You can't do that sitting, you know, at home by yourself. It has to be more, you know, planned and purposeful, and that's really different than what anybody is used to right now.
Right.
And data science is one of those things too. It's like it's good to talk it through sometimes, or bounce things off of people, you know, your ideas, your thoughts. So it is going to be interesting to see how this really impacts us going forward, working from home all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Anybody having challenges already with that? It's been a few months now. Do you feel like you're not as creative? Is that a good way to put it?
I had an experience. I should probably preface by saying I'm a incoming student with the Masters of Science and Analytics program at UChicago. So I just got out of my undergrad, and finishing up my research project proved to be difficult because of communication issues with my advisor. And it wasn't until I figured out how to connect my iPad to Zoom and was able to treat it like a whiteboard and like walk through what I was experiencing did we actually like connect and figured out where the miscommunication was and where like the issues were. So I find that like what could have taken 5 minutes in his office on his whiteboard ended up taking, you know, oh, well, I'm not available for a meeting today. And, you know, it just kind of, I ended up having to work like the entire weekend up to the deadline because of just miscommunications.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
I agree. I can definitely agree with that. This just happened to me this week with my team, and trying to understand some data sets, and you know, with the connectivity issues that you experience, other teammates experience that are subject matter experts, you need their you know, insights on. It just really delays I think the thought process in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's keep going. Next slide, Roger. Okay. So So I wanted to also find out how COVID impacted analytics teams hiring. And which I found this to be really interesting. About 50% of companies either saw no impact or in fact were still continuing to hire. So now many firms used furloughs and salary cuts instead of actually reducing headcount, which I thought was interesting. I've never seen that, and I've had, this is my fourth recession, right, in my career, and I'd never seen that before. It might have been happening, but certainly not nearly as widespread as it happened this year. And I think people were trying to not lay off people and preserve the headcount because they didn't want to have to go through the pain of rehiring if in fact the impact of COVID was going to be short term. So it was a smart move and good for people, I think. So and I think I mentioned about how now there's, people are having to take salary cuts still. I'm seeing new salary cuts across some organizations, as well as people being told right up front that they don't expect an increase this year. So, okay, next slide. Now this next slide talks about the different sizes of companies and who's laid off and who's not. So you can see here, no surprise, the companies that are larger were less impacted through layoffs. So, okay, next slide. So here we asked people about their job stability, both from a personal perspective as well as for their company. So in both cases, analytics people were feeling either very positive or somewhat positive about their stability, which I thought was interesting. But even more interesting, they felt a bit more positive about their personal stability as opposed to their company stability. So I just figured it was a lot of really self-confident people out there, as they should be. So, I also think that this is a reflection of how everyone knows now that data-driven decision-making is part of the success of a company. And so, it's in the DNA of most organizations now. They know it's critical in order to be competitive. And so quantitative people tend to be more comfortable that they will not be the first targeted if there is any kind of headcount reduction. So it's good. So next slide. So what's the future going to look like? Everybody wants to know, and it's not going to look like that picture. So 2020, everyone knows also, is a very complicated year. I mean, we've had COVID. We've had a lot of social justice movement going on, as well as this is obviously going to be a very interesting presidential election year. There's been a lot of urban unrest, and we, the hurricane. We've got a hurricane that just hit, and it's just the start of the season. It's crazy. We've got Hong Kong, China. We've got cybersecurity issues. It's a crazy time. So, yeah.
It's interesting that the climate issues aren't as prevalent because we've got so many other big issues.
I know.
The hurricanes and the fires are related to that, loss of glaciers, all of that. It's like that would be a huge issue any other time, but it's not.
Right. It's quite amazing how that's taken a back seat, and it's frightening. I didn't even mention it. That's terrible. It's terrible. And I've been to Greenland, and which is it. If you've never been to Greenland, has anybody been to Greenland? It's fabulous. You should go. So if you're going to Iceland, be sure to take like a 4-day side trip to Greenland. It is absolutely stunning. beautiful. But, and you know, all those people, this was probably about 5 years ago that I was in Greenland. And, you know, they're loving climate change. And I'm like going, no, don't love climate change. Because now they can actually grow crops there. And they've never been able to do that before. So, it's an absolutely fabulous and a very interesting country. So highly recommend that. So next slide. So there's a lot of questions, obviously, that are unanswered here. I mean, what are the longer term implications of work from home? And obviously, the whole supply chain, I mean, if you're in operations research and supply chain, oh my goodness, there's going to be lots and lots of changes upcoming there. And then, as I mentioned, you know, what's going to happen to salaries. So pay attention to the compensation study this year, and then let's see what happens next year. So. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about recruiting and how recruiting has changed in the time of this new normal. Certainly the process has speeded up. You know, people are more accessible. Nobody is traveling, so they're available to take interviews or do interviews. And it started, well, back up a little bit. When the whole lockdown thing started in March, business went to zero. I mean, my business was like completely flat. So then in May, everybody started to call again. They wanted to, you know, start the conversations again with people and really go. And then it just started going fast. So it was sort of, it was very interesting. I was very pleased with that. So, and companies really embrace the idea of video interviewing. And this, I think, will have a long-term impact. I don't think they're ever going back to flying people in necessarily, or they won't until the very end, and they won't have to meet, 6 or 7 people during the course of the day. They'll have to meet with maybe 3, something like that, because they'll do a lot of that interviewing online. So also, you know, start dates have sped up as a result of this too, because people aren't relocating right away. I mean, you know, people are accepting jobs across the country, but relocation is not really required until they have a better visibility on what's going to happen, you know, with the crisis and the work from home. Now, some early career people are choosing to move right away, but many people with families and so on are delaying their actual physical move until later, and they're getting, you know, computers shipped to them and all of that kind of thing. So another change that we've seen is that they want to do a technical assessment first before they even get on the phone, and especially, again, this is usually the case for more junior level people, or like this afternoon I was talking to this private equity group, and they have like a mini little exam that they want to give before they even get on the phone with the candidate, which is a fabulous idea, and a lot of our clients are doing that. I also tell my clients that, you know, this is a really good time to hire, because 6 months ago, a lot of these candidates were not thinking about a change, and they were happy and everything was going along great, and now they're available. So there's some really strong candidates that are on the market right now and available. So, but I will say, you know, most of our candidates get multiple offers now. So, I mean, I talked to a guy this afternoon, and it's like, you know, Linda, it was really slow there for a while, but I've got 2 offers on the table. I'm supposed to get another one tomorrow. And, you know, I'm talking to him about a 4th company that wants to talk to him, right? So it's just amazing how the demand for talent has really sped up during this process. So.
I'll bring up something else, Linda, on this. Are you finding that you're coaching your people differently? Well, yeah, how should I say this? You know, there's the, you know, how do you dress for an interview? There's, you know, how do you dress for, you know, kind of these online interviews? Is my background okay, or should I, you know, there's this kind of things that are really different, right? That are you seeing that happening a lot?
And, I have, again, because I work with the seniors, they pretty much know. I mean, they use their judgment. If somebody's going to make a dumb decision about what's in their background, I guess maybe they shouldn't get the job. I don't know if it's a senior level person. But, most people, I think, use their own judgment. Sometimes with juniors, we'll definitely advise them, just like we would advise them on what they should wear. What's an appropriate way to dress, because in some cases, if you wear a suit and tie, you're out, so you kind of have to know. I mean, it goes both ways. So it's interesting time. So.
Even like one weird thing that I found is if I wear I have some striped shirts and I love striped shirts, but if you wear it on a video, it's this beautiful moire pattern that it drives me nuts looking at myself. So,
yeah. Oh, okay. So next slide. So next year we'll see, how compensation overall is going to be impacted. So I also think, I will say that most of the offers that we've seen come out in the last 3 months since the crisis, they've been in line. I haven't seen any companies that were trying to lowball candidates. It does take away a little bit of the negotiating power, though, for candidates in a lot of cases because they're not working or that. They just don't feel like they can negotiate as hard, and they're probably right. So, the other thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier is people are asking for part-time or reduced schedule because of the at-home schooling now. So that's going to be a tough thing for a lot of parents. Yep, that's it for that. Okay, so hopefully this isn't the end, but again, as I said, we're going to be doing a lot more research here on what's happening to the analyst community. So be sure to check back in with our website because what's true today clearly is not going to be true a month from now. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So tell you what, does anybody have any questions? We can take a few minutes of questions, I think. We were doing a pretty good discussion, so I don't know. Anything else that people want to know? Okay, all right. I did say that if people want to stick around and just talk, we can do that too. Or if people are done for the evening, that's okay too. It's getting up there to dinner time, so that might be a good thing.
Do you want me to break in a little bit and let people know where they can find additional information, more of the data that we covered?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
I'm happy to do that if you want, since I spent so much time on it for the past few months. So if on the Burtch Works website, if you go to burtchworks.com/blog, that's where you can locate a lot of the COVID research pieces. We actually have a blog tag that is COVID-19, so that'll pull up all of the surveys that we did with the IIA over the past few months. So that's, of course, very interesting. If you want more information from the salary report, because we did look at the salaries broken down by region, industry, job, there's a whole bunch of slicing and dicing going on. You can download those for free at burtchworks.com/study. And there you'll also find, I believe, the slides and the webinar recording, which kind of it covers some of the same information that we talked about today. But the report, as Linda said, is quite long and jam-packed with information. So definitely check that out if you are, looking for a little bit more detailed information on salaries and whatnot.
Right. And Stacy, just so I can introduce her, is my fabulous social media director. And she does all the writing and it's amazing how she's been able to, you know, go from Oberlin and into quant and really take it. I'm very proud of you, Stacy. You're doing such a great job. Thank you. So, and you've been
Thanks, Linda.
6 years or something.
So, you know, I was realizing when you put up the study slide, I actually started when you put together, I started right as you were putting together that first report in 2013. So that was a little over 7 years ago.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
So
my director and I would joke like, oh boy, we almost got divorced that year. So really hard.
I remember it was a lot of, because it was a lot of like preliminary figuring out how we were going to report everything and like describe and talk about everything. So it's been really interesting to see like the process of like from that first report to now what the presentations and reports look like. I feel like we've got it down pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
I actually did have a question, Linda. If we as candidates wanted to get onto your radar screen, what should we do?
Well, send me your resume. So, and it's lburch@burtchworks.com. And we can get the conversation started. I'll hook you up with the appropriate recruiter and go through like a brainstorming session with you. So happy to do it.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, Roger, flip to the next slide because I think it has the contact information on that.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Look at that.
Right. So.
Oh yeah, so this is the study download page. And then I think we have, I can't remember if I put more slides at the end of this with additional.
No.
Okay.
Right.
But I put your email address in the chat so that if people want to look at the chat, your email address is in there.
Hey, Roger, Miguel's comment earlier reminded me of a public service announcement here. I work for a company called Lytix and obviously involved with analytics. We have a good relationship with the University of Chicago, and Lytix has the Lytix IQ platform for basically data management, data visualization, predictive analytics, and optimization. And for anyone in finishing a master's degree at University of Chicago with a capstone project, we're providing the platform on a complimentary basis. Roger knows how to reach me.
Yeah.
He also knows how to reach Greg Green, and Greg can facilitate that as well. Greg is at University of Chicago.
Okay. And I'm going to chime in on something that Linda said. She's a great resource. Burtch Works in general is an amazing resource. I don't know how long Linda and I have known each other, but I stay in touch with her. We get together we haven't gotten together for lunch recently.
Right.
But we would have a conversation or get together for lunch, both sides of the table from early on to now. So either as a candidate or as somebody that was hiring, or just to stay in touch. Her organization is great for that. So, okay. Anybody else with a question or comment? Okay. Well, listen, again, thank you very much, Linda and Burtch Works.
Thanks for having us.
For putting this together. And thank you everyone for coming. Again, next month, and I want to say it's I don't remember, but it'll be on, I'll be putting it up in the next couple of days. We've got Microsoft coming in talking about AI for social good, and that should be a good presentation as well. So we'll look forward to seeing you next month when we do another one of these webinars, okay?
Great.
All right, thanks much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Roger.